Sometimes the first crack in a gilded life doesn't come quietly. It shatters like glass, loud enough to wake the soul. Amid the glamour of a luxurious wedding ceremony, a single act shattered the enchantment. The groom, without hesitation, slapped the bride. But what he didn't know was that this act would mark the beginning of a twist. Fate had carefully planned one that would change everything in unimaginable ways. The Grand Monarch Hotel's ballroom glittered like a crystal palace on that fateful June evening, its chandeliers casting diamond-like light reflections across the faces of San Francisco's elite. Lila Bennett stood before the full-length mirror in her $50,000 Elie Saab wedding gown, her fingers trembling as they traced the delicate lace sleeve. The reflection showed everything she had dreamed of since childhood: the perfect bride, the perfect venue, the perfect life, waiting to unfold. Yet her hazel eyes, usually bright with determination, held a shadow that even the most expensive makeup artist couldn't conceal. "Miss Lila, your mother's Van Cleef necklace looks absolutely stunning," her personal stylist, Carla, gushed, adjusting the $175,000 piece that graced her neck. Pacific Heights will be talking about this wedding for years. Lila's penthouse suite at the Fairmont Hotel, where she'd spent the morning preparing, offered a commanding view of Nob Hill. The room itself was a testament to excess, champagne flowing from crystal flutes, thousands of exotic flowers adorning every surface, and a team of professionals fussing over every detail of her appearance. "Avery should be here by now," Lila murmured, checking her Patek Philippe watch, a small engagement gift from Graham, worth more than most people's annual salary. As if summoned by thought alone, Avery Lewis burst through the door, her Louboutin heels clicking against the marble floor. "I'm so sorry." Traffic on Van Ness was insane, even with the Bentley's driver taking shortcuts. Avery's face, though apologetic, carried an underlying tension that Lila chose to ignore. "But I'm here now. And you look like $1,000,000. Lila attempted a laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Try 50 million, Avery corrected, but her smile faltered as she approached her best friend. In a lower voice, she added, "Are you sure about this, Lila? After what happened at the rehearsal dinner?" Lila's hand instinctively moved to cover her wrist, where a Bulgari bracelet concealed a fading bruise. "Graham was just stressed about the acquisition. You know how much pressure he's under with the Halstead deal." 3 years ago, Lila had been a rising interior designer, transforming San Francisco's most exclusive properties with her innovative vision. Then she met Graham Kingsley IV at a charity gala at the De Young Museum. He was everything the city's elite valued: Harvard Business School graduate, heir to Kingsley Capital, and possessor of a smile that could charm board members and socialites alike. Their whirlwind romance had been the talk of their social circle, chronicled in lifestyle magazines and celebrated at every exclusive venue from the Top of the Mark to Napa Estates. What the society columns didn't capture were the subtle changes: how Lila's design firm was quietly closed to focus on their future together, how her vibrant friend circle shrank to those Graham approved of, how her phone was regularly checked for security purposes by Kingsley Capital's IT team. "Miss Kingsley," Carla interrupted, holding out a Mont Blanc pen. "The lawyers are waiting in the adjacent suite for the prenup signing." "Wanted me to remind you about the prenup signing?" Carla interrupted, holding out a Mont Blanc pen. "The lawyers are waiting in the adjacent suite." Avery's face darkened. "The prenup? Now? An hour before the ceremony?" "Graham's mother insisted on some last-minute adjustments," Lila explained, her voice carefully neutral. "Just standard provisions about company protection." The prenuptial agreement, delivered by Evelyn Kingsley's personal legal team, was anything but standard. Its 100 pages of clauses and conditions read more like a prison sentence than a marriage contract. But with 300 guests already seated, including the governor, 2 senators, and the creme of San Francisco society, Lila felt the weight of expectations crushing any thoughts of resistance. A sharp knock preceded Evelyn Kingsley's entrance. Graham's mother, immaculate in Chanel and dripping with Harry Winston diamonds, surveyed the room with the same critical eye she used in the Kingsley Capital boardroom. "Lila, darling, you look appropriate," Evelyn managed, her lipstick smile not reaching her ice-blue eyes, "though I still think the Dior would have been more suitable. Now about those papers." Mrs. Kingsley. Avery stepped forward, her voice steady despite Evelyn's intimidating presence. Surely this could wait until after the ceremony. Evelyn's gaze could have frozen the San Francisco Bay. Miss Lewis, while we appreciate your friendship with Lila, family matters are precisely that. Family matters. The next hour passed in a blur of signatures, touch-ups, and carefully orchestrated photographs. Lila felt increasingly disconnected, as if watching herself from a great distance. The girl in the mirror nodded at the right moments, smiled on cue, and played her part perfectly. Then came the moment that would change everything. The monarch's grand ballroom had been transformed into a winter wonderland. Despite the summer heat outside, thousands of white orchids and crystals created an ethereal canopy above the guests. As Wagner's wedding march began to play on the string quartet's priceless instruments, Leela stood at the entrance, her father beside her. "Ready, princess?" Thomas Bennett asked, concern flickering across his distinguished features. "You know you can still." "Daddy, please," Leela whispered, her grip tightening on her bouquet of rare blue roses. "Everything is perfect. Everything has to be perfect. Everything is perfect. Everything has to be perfect." But perfection, like the crystal glasses lining the reception tables, was about to shatter. As Lila began her walk down the aisle, she caught sight of Graham at the altar. His handsome face, so often featured in Forbes and Fortune, showed none of the rage she'd witnessed the night before. Yet something in his stance, the way his fingers clenched and unclenched, sent a chill down her spine. The ceremony proceeded like a perfectly choreographed dance. Each word and gesture was rehearsed to perfection. The 7-tier wedding cake, the vintage champagne, the surprised gasps as doves were released into the evening sky, everything followed the script Evelyn had meticulously planned. Until it didn't. During the reception, Leela was speaking with the French ambassador when she felt Graham's hand clamp around her arm. His whisper, meant only for her, carried that familiar edge that usually preceded his darkest moods. "I saw you talking to Noah earlier. The help? Really, Lila?" Noah, the handsome young sommelier who had merely recommended a wine pairing, had shown Lila more genuine kindness in that brief exchange than Graham had in months. Maybe that's why she did something she had never dared before. She pulled her arm away. The sound of the slap echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot, silencing the orchestra and freezing the dancers mid-step. Lila's cheek burned, but it was the public humiliation, the collective gasp of 300 of San Francisco's most influential people, that truly stung. In that crystalline moment of silence, as champagne bubbles rose in abandoned glasses and sheet music fluttered to the floor, Leela saw her reflection fractured across every shocked face in the crowd. And in each fragment she finally recognized the truth. She'd been avoiding it. This wasn't the beginning of her fairy tale. It was the end of her silence. The aftermath of the wedding reception unfolded like a carefully orchestrated symphony of damage control. Evelyn Kingsley's network of connections sprang into action with practiced precision. By morning, society pages had transformed the incident into a charming anecdote about passionate newlyweds, while social media posts mysteriously disappeared from guests' accounts. The Kingsley family's PR machine worked overtime, spinning tales of champagne-induced misunderstandings and romantic intensity. Lila found herself ensconced in Graham's penthouse at Skycrest Tower, San Francisco's tallest residential building. The $95 million apartment, a wedding gift from Kingsley Capital's board, offered spectacular views of the city through floor-to-ceiling windows. But to Lila, they felt more like the bars of an exquisitely appointed cage. "The Ashcrofts have invited us for dinner at Le Beau Rod," Graham announced one evening, adjusting his Brioni suit in the mirror. "Mother says it's crucial for the Halstead merger." Leela looked up from her untouched beluga caviar, her reflection fragmenting across the crystalline dining table. "I'm not feeling well." "Perhaps that wasn't a request, darling." Graham's tone remained pleasant, but his eyes hardened. "We, the new Oscar de Era," Evelyn said. "Mother had it specially curated for you." The dress in question hung like a beautiful threat in their walk-in closet. Every item in Lila's wardrobe now bore Evelyn's stamp of approval. Each piece was selected to project the image of Kingsley Capital's perfect daughter-in-law. Even Lila's personal shopper at Wilkes Bashford had been replaced by Evelyn's trusted stylist. Life settled into a gilded routine. Mornings began with Evelyn's assistant delivering a schedule of approved social engagements. Lunches were carefully choreographed appearances at San Francisco's most prestigious venues, where Lila played her role under the watchful eyes of Evelyn's social circle. Evenings belonged to Graham's business functions, where Lila stood by his side, the perfect corporate wife, her smile as practiced as her silence. But beneath the surface, tensions simmered. Graham's control grew more suffocating with each passing day. Her phone calls were monitored, her credit card statements scrutinized, her every movement tracked by the building's security team. Even her former colleagues in interior design stopped responding to her messages, quietly informed that Kingsley Capital might reconsider their contracts. "It's for your own protection," Graham would say, his hands gentle even as his words cut like knives. "You know how dangerous the city can be for someone in your position. Remember what happened to the Van Alstyne heiress last summer?" The threats were always veiled, wrapped in concern and sealed with designer gifts. After each episode of controlling behavior, a new piece of jewelry would appear. A Van Cleef & Arpels necklace, a rare Patek Philippe watch, a Cartier bracelet. Each gift felt like another link in an increasingly heavy chain. Evelyn's influence proved even more insidious. She orchestrated weekly family dinners at Le Marchand, where she would dissect Lila's every perceived flaw over perfectly plated French cuisine. "Darling, you simply must work on your table presence," Evelyn would say, her voice dripping with manufactured concern. "The way you held your fork at the Morgan Stanley dinner, well, let's just say people noticed, and that simply won't do for a Kingsley woman." The only respite came from Avery, who refused to be intimidated by the Kingsley family's power plays, despite Evelyn's attempts to freeze her out of their social circle. Avery maintained her weekly lunch dates with Lila at their favorite cafe in Pacific Heights. "You don't have to live like this, Lil," Avery urged during one such meeting, her voice low enough to evade the ever-present security detail. "My cousin's a partner at Aldridge & Chen. One call, and we could have you out of there with enough evidence to—" "It's not that simple," Lila interrupted, her hands shaking as she reached for her Hermes bag. "Graham's lawyers have everything locked down, the prenup, the NDAs, the corporate entanglements, and I'd lose everything." "You're already losing everything that matters," Avery countered, sliding a business card across the table. "Just keep this, please." But it wasn't Avery's lawyer who would ultimately shift the balance. It was Noah, the sommelier from the wedding, whose path unexpectedly crossed Lila's again at a charity wine tasting at the Dion Museum. "Mrs. Kingsley," he greeted her formally, but his eyes held the same genuine warmth she remembered. "The 1982 Lafite Rothschild might interest you. It's known for its complexity and hidden depths." Through seemingly chance encounters at various elite social functions, Noah became a subtle but persistent reminder of a world beyond the Kingsley family's influence. His knowledge of wine opened doors to conversations that even Evelyn's surveillance couldn't fully monitor. Each interaction, though brief, felt like coming up for air after being underwater. "The Chateau Margaux you recommended was extraordinary," Lila told him at another event, aware of Graham's eyes on her from across the room. "I never knew wine could tell such stories." "Every vintage has its own journey," Noah replied carefully, his meaning clear in his steady gaze. "Some need time to break free from their constraints before reaching their true potential." But their growing connection didn't go unnoticed. Evelyn's network of social spies reported every interaction, leading to increasingly volatile confrontations with Graham. "Do you think I'm blind?" Graham snarled one night, hurling a baccarat crystal glass against the wall. "Do you think I don't see how you look at him? How you embarrass me in front of everyone who matters?" The next day, Noah was fired from his position at the wine merchant that supplied San Francisco's elite establishments. His reputation was systematically dismantled through whispered rumors and strategic calls. Yet somehow, he managed to secure a position at a small but prestigious wine bar in Sausalito, just beyond the reach of Kingsley Capital's influence. Lila's world continued to shrink. Graham had new security features installed throughout their apartment. Cameras in every room, monitoring software on all her devices, and a dedicated team of personnel who reported her every move. Her weekly lunches with Avery were reduced to supervised visits in public places, always under the watchful eyes of Graham's men. Evelyn's psychological warfare reached new heights. She began hosting intimate mentoring sessions with other elite wives, using Lila as an example of both privilege and subtle inadequacy. "My dear," she would say, her voice carrying across the private dining room at La Nuit, "we simply must work on your public speaking. The way you hesitated during your speech at the Children's Hospital benefit. Well, we can't have people questioning Kingsley Capital's commitment to philanthropy, can we?" Each criticism was delivered with impeccable timing and maximum impact, designed to strip away what remained of Lila's confidence. Yet something unexpected was happening beneath the surface. Each attempt to control her, each manipulation, each public humiliation was slowly crystallizing into something harder, more resilient. Avery noticed the change first. During a carefully monitored lunch at Luku, she saw something different in Lila's eyes, a calculating edge that hadn't been there before. "You're planning something," Avery whispered, pretending to adjust her Hermes scarf to avoid the security team's lip-reading capabilities. Lila's smile remained perfect. Practiced. Empty. "I'm learning, Avery. Everything they're teaching me, every rule, every expectation, I'm learning it all." The transformation was subtle but profound. Lila began playing Evelyn's game with unexpected precision. She hosted flawless dinner parties, made strategic appearances at key social functions, and maintained an impeccable public image. She became what they wanted, the perfect Kingsley wife. So perfect, it was almost suspicious. Even Noah, during their increasingly rare encounters, sensed the change. At a wine auction at Christie's, their eyes met briefly across the room. "The chateau lure you're bidding on?" he said when social convention allowed them to interact. "It's known for its patience. Years of pressure create something unexpected." Graham and Evelyn celebrated what they saw as Lila's final surrender to their world. The leash loosened slightly. Supervised lunches with Avery became slightly less supervised, social appearances slightly less scripted. Yet they failed to notice how Lila was quietly cataloging every weakness, every secret, every pressure point in their carefully constructed empire. The breaking point came during the annual Kingsley Capital Charity Gala at the Mandarin Oriental. Lila, resplendent in a custom Valentino gown, played her role to perfection. She charmed board members, dazzled investors, and maintained the precise balance of grace and submission that Evelyn had demanded. But as she stood beside Graham during his keynote speech, watching him bask in the adoration of San Francisco's elite, Lila felt something shift inside her. The weight of all the diamonds he'd given her, the designer dresses selected to keep her contained, the social connections meant to bind her. It all crystallized into something sharp and dangerous. Later that night, as she stood in their penthouse bathroom, staring at her reflection in the gold-rimmed mirror, Lila made a decision. The woman looking back at her wasn't just surviving anymore. She was preparing for war. She picked up her phone and sent a single text to Avery. "I'm ready." The pieces were set, the players in position, and the true game was about to begin. Lila had learned her lessons well, perhaps too well for those who had taught them. As she slipped into bed beside Graham, her mind was already racing with possibilities, each one more devastating than the last. The next morning, she would wake up and play her role perfectly, just as she had been trained to do. But now, every smile concealed a plan. Every gracious nod, a master calculation, and every perfectly arranged detail was another step toward something none of them saw coming. In the glittering world of San Francisco's elite, where appearances were everything and power was the only currency that mattered, Lila was about to prove that the most dangerous player was the one who had nothing left to lose, except the golden chains that bound her. The truth about Graham Kingsley IV began unraveling on a crisp autumn morning at the Four Seasons restaurant, where the city's power brokers had gathered for the annual Financial Excellence Awards. Lila sat at the primary table, watching her husband accept another accolade for his visionary leadership of Kingsley Capital, when her phone vibrated with an encrypted message from an unknown number. "Your husband's first wife didn't die in a sailing accident. Check the Cayman Islands trust accounts from 2019. A friend, Lila maintained her composed smile, but her mind raced. Graham had never mentioned being married before, and Evelyn's meticulously curated family history made no reference to a previous marriage. Yet something about the message rang true, echoing doubts she'd long suppressed. That evening, during a charity auction at Sais, Noah managed to slip her a thumb drive while discussing a rare vintage of Domaine de la Romane Conti. They were keeping her busy, distracted, unable to see the larger picture. But Lila wasn't the only one making discoveries. Graham's paranoia grew as whispers of investigation reached him through his own network. His behavior became increasingly erratic, his public mask of charm slipping to reveal the darkness beneath. During a private dinner at Pearl, he grabbed Lila's wrist with bruising force. "If you think Victoria was clever," he snarled, "you should know she wasn't the first person who tried to expose us. This family has survived for generations by dealing with threats permanently." The threat was clear, but it came with an unexpected revelation. Lila realized that Graham's marriage to Victoria hadn't been his first. There were others, their disappearances disguised as accidents or convenient relocations, their fortunes absorbed into the Kingsley empire. Evelyn, ever the strategist, sensed the shifting dynamics. She increased her psychological warfare. But now, Lila saw through her tactics. Each coincidental run-in with Graham's ex-girlfriends, each subtle reminder of her replaceability, only served to strengthen Lila's resolve. The turning point came during the annual Kingsley Capital Board retreat at the Ritz-Carlton in the Cayman Islands. Lila, playing the role of devoted wife, used her access to photograph crucial documents while Graham was in meetings. But she wasn't the only one with an agenda. "I know what you're doing," a voice said behind her as she stood on her suite's balcony. It was James Thompson, the CEO of Thompson Global, their supposed merger partner. "And I want in." Thompson revealed that the merger was a trap. Kingsley Capital was planning to asset strip his company, leaving thousands jobless while pocketing billions. He offered to help Lila expose the truth, but his help came with conditions that made her question his motives. Meanwhile, Avery's cousin at Aldridge & Chen had assembled a team of lawyers ready to move against Kingsley Capital. But as they gathered evidence, Lila discovered a painful truth. Avery's family had old ties to the Kingsleys, and her cousin's firm had once helped bury Victoria's case. "I swear I didn't know," Avery pleaded during a tense confrontation at the De Young Museum. "My family kept me in the dark. But Lila, you have to believe me, I'm on your side." The web of betrayal and loyalty grew more complex with each passing day. Noah, despite the risks to himself, continued gathering intelligence from his connections in the luxury service industry. But even he had secrets. His apparently humble position as a sommelier masked connections to European banking families with their own grievances against the Kingsleys. Lila found herself at the center of a dangerous game, unsure whom to trust. The evidence she'd gathered painted a picture of corruption spanning decades: forced acquisitions, environmental disasters covered up with bribes, politicians bought and sold like vintage wines. Evelyn, proving more formidable than ever, began making moves of her own. She arranged for Lila's former interior design mentor to receive an offer. They were keeping her busy, distracted, unable to see the larger picture. But Lila wasn't the only one making discoveries. Graham's paranoia grew as whispers of investigation reached him through his own network. His behavior became increasingly erratic, his public mask of charm slipping to reveal the darkness beneath. During a private dinner at Pearl, he grabbed Lila's wrist with bruising force. "If you think Victoria was clever," he snarled, "you should know she wasn't the first person who tried to expose us. This family has survived for generations by dealing with threats permanently." The threat was clear, but it came with an unexpected revelation. Lila realized that Graham's marriage to Victoria hadn't been his first. There were others, their disappearances disguised as accidents or convenient relocations, their fortunes absorbed into the Kingsley empire. Evelyn, ever the strategist, sensed the shifting dynamics. She increased her psychological warfare. But now, Lila saw through her tactics. Each coincidental run-in with Graham's ex-girlfriends, each subtle reminder of her replaceability, only served to strengthen Lila's resolve. The turning point came during the annual Kingsley Capital Board retreat at the Ritz-Carlton in the Cayman Islands. Lila, playing the role of devoted wife, used her access to photograph crucial documents while Graham was in meetings. But she wasn't the only one with an agenda. "I know what you're doing," a voice said behind her as she stood on her suite's balcony. It was James Thompson, the CEO of Thomson Global, their supposed merger partner. "And I want in." Thompson revealed that the merger was a trap. Kingsley Capital was planning to asset strip his company, leaving thousands jobless while pocketing billions. He offered to help Lila expose the truth. But his help came with conditions that made her question his motives. Meanwhile, Avery's cousin at Aldridge and Chen had assembled a team of lawyers ready to move against Kingsley Capital. But as they gathered evidence, Lila discovered a painful truth. Avery's family had old ties to the Kingsleys, and her cousin's firm had once helped bury Victoria's case. "I swear, I didn't know," Avery pleaded during a tense confrontation at the De Young Museum. "My family kept me in the dark. But Lila, you have to believe me, I'm on your side." The web of betrayal and loyalty grew more complex with each passing day. Noah, despite the risks to himself, continued gathering intelligence from his connections in the luxury service industry. But even he had secrets. His apparently humble position as a sommelier masked connections to European banking families with their own grievances against the Kingsleys. Lila found herself at the center of a dangerous game, unsure whom to trust. The evidence she'd gathered painted a picture of corruption spanning decades, forced acquisitions, environmental disasters covered up with bribes, politicians bought and sold like vintage wines. Evelyn, proving more formidable than ever, began making moves of her own. She arranged for Lila's former interior design mentor to receive an offer. She couldn't refuse, contingent on her publicly discrediting Lila's professional reputation. "It's nothing personal, dear," Evelyn said during a private lunch at Liron. "Just insurance. You understand, don't you? In our world, we must always plan for contingencies." But Lila had learned from the best. While Evelyn focused on destroying her past, Lila was building her future. She had assembled her own network of influence, disgruntled former employees, overlooked service staff, and even some of San Francisco's old money families who resented the Kingsleys' rise to dominance. The pieces were in place, but the risks were mounting. Graham's cleanup crew had started following Avery, and Noah reported suspicious inquiries about his past. Even Thompson's alliance began to seem increasingly like a carefully laid trap. During a record-breaking auction at Christie's, where Graham was bidding millions on a rare Monet, Lila received another anonymous message. "Victoria left a failsafe. Downtown storage unit 237. 17 code 051209. Hurry." The discovery of Victoria's failsafe would change everything. But it also meant Lila had to make an impossible choice. The evidence she needed was within reach. But using it would destroy not just Graham and Evelyn. It would take down dozens of powerful families connected to Kingsley Capital. As she stood in their penthouse that night, watching San Francisco's lights glitter like diamonds in the darkness, Lila faced her moment of truth. The weight of her diamonds felt like armor now. Her designer dress, a warrior's uniform. She had learned to play their game, perhaps too well. Tomorrow would bring either her greatest triumph or her final defeat. But as she prepared for bed, maintaining the perfect facade of a devoted wife, Lila allowed herself a small, dangerous smile. In teaching her to be the perfect Kingsley woman, they had created something far more dangerous than they could have imagined. The next morning's headlines would shake San Francisco's foundations. But the real earthquake was still to come. The game was no longer about escape. It was about justice, revenge, and the price of truth in a world built on beautiful lies. Lila's investigation led her deeper into the Kingsley family's history of manipulation and control. During a private exhibition at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, she encountered an elderly art curator who had worked with the family for decades. Between discussions of priceless paintings and upcoming auctions, the curator revealed a pattern that sent chills down Lila's spine. "Every generation has its Evelyn," the curator whispered, pretending to admire a Kandinsky, a woman who maintains the family's power through whatever means necessary. "Your mother-in-law, she learned from the best." Her own mother-in-law orchestrated similar accidents in the 1980s. The revelation added another layer to Lila's understanding. The Kingsley dynasty wasn't just about wealth and power. It was about control, passed down through generations, each era bringing new methods of maintaining their iron grip on San Francisco's elite society. That evening, during a private concert at the War Memorial Opera House, Lila noticed something unusual. Evelyn's normally impeccable composure slipped when she spotted an unexpected guest, an elegant woman in her 70s who commanded attention despite her minimal jewelry and understated Chanel suit. "Margaret Blackwood," Noah murmured, appearing beside Lila with a glass of champagne. The only person who ever successfully challenged the Kingsley family and lived to tell about it, though she lost everything in the process. Lila managed to arrange a clandestine meeting with Margaret at the NEA Gallery's cafe over Viennese coffee and pastries worth their weight in gold. Margaret shared her story, a tale of resistance, sacrifice, and survival that paralleled Lila's own with haunting similarity. "They'll try to isolate you completely soon," Margaret warned her, aged hands trembling slightly as she reached for her cup. When Evelyn started losing control of her first daughter-in-law, she arranged for her to be committed to a private psychiatric facility in Switzerland. The poor girl never returned. The weight of these revelations pressed heavily on Lila as she attended the grand opening of a new luxury hotel tower that evening. Graham was there, charming investors with practiced ease while keeping her within arm's reach. His possessive gestures, once masked as affection, now felt like warnings. But Lila wasn't without resources of her own. Through careful observation and strategic planning, she had identified potential allies among the hotel staff, people who had witnessed the Kingsley family's darker moments and kept their silence out of fear rather than loyalty. The hotel's head of security, a former military intelligence officer named Marcus Kane, proved particularly valuable. He had maintained detailed records of every incident he'd been asked to handle for the Kingsley family over the years. "I've got documentation of at least 3 cover-ups," Marcus revealed during a brief conversation in the hotel's security office, including footage. "From the night Victoria disappeared, I kept it as insurance," Marcus told her. "But maybe it's time it served a greater purpose." Lila's network of allies continued to grow, but so did the danger. Evelyn's surveillance became more obvious, almost threatening in its visibility. New security personnel appeared in the building, their presence a constant reminder of the family's reach. During a charity gala at the California Academy of Sciences, Lila overheard a conversation between Graham and one of his trusted advisors that confirmed her worst fears. They were discussing contingency plans, ways to handle her if she became problematic, like Victoria. "The facility in Switzerland is still an option," the advisor suggested, his words nearly lost in the ambient noise of the gala. "Or there's always the sailing accident scenario. It worked before." The conversation sent Lila into action. She began making preparations of her own, converting some of her jewelry into untraceable cryptocurrency accounts, establishing connections with journalists known for their integrity, and securing multiple escape routes. Avery, despite the complicated revelation about her family's connections, proved invaluable in this phase. She helped Lila set up a secure communication network using burner phones and encrypted messaging apps. More importantly, she introduced Lila to a group of domestic violence survivors who had rebuilt their lives after escaping wealthy, powerful abusers. The final piece of Victoria's puzzle waited in that downtown storage unit. When Lila finally managed to access it, she found something unexpected. Not just evidence of financial crimes, but proof of a systematic conspiracy involving some of San Francisco's most prominent families. Victoria had uncovered a network of shell companies and offshore accounts that went far beyond Kingsley Capital. The documents revealed how the city's elite had been protecting each other's secrets for generations, creating an intricate web of mutual blackmail and support. The implications were staggering. Using this information wouldn't just expose Graham and Evelyn, it would shake the foundations of San Francisco society itself. Lila realized she held in her hands the power to destroy not just her abusers, but an entire system of privilege and corruption. As she returned to the penthouse that night, Lila knew she had crossed a point of no return. The evidence she had gathered was too explosive to be ignored, too comprehensive to be buried. The question was no longer whether to use it, but how to survive its revelation. In the morning, she would wake up next to Graham, kiss him goodbye as he left for the office, and maintain every appearance of the perfect Kingsley wife. But beneath that polished exterior, plans were already in motion. Plans that would change everything. The game had evolved beyond personal survival or revenge. Lila now stood at the crossroads of a much larger battle, one that would either reshape San Francisco's power structure or destroy her in the attempt. The stakes had never been higher, and the next move would determine not just her fate, but the future of an entire social order built on gilded lies and beautiful deception. The transformation of Lila Kingsley began in the private exhibition space of a Soma art gallery, where she stood before an abstract painting worth millions, seeing herself reflected in its fractured surfaces. The piece, a recent acquisition by Kingsley Capital's corporate collection, depicted a butterfly emerging from a gilded cage, an irony not lost on her as she planned her own emergence. "Your eye for design hasn't diminished," noted Regina Winters, a legendary gallerist who had once championed Lila's interior design work. "Though I suspect you see things differently now." This chance encounter, carefully orchestrated through Noah's connections, marked the beginning of Lila's professional resurrection. Regina, it turned out, had her own scores to settle with the Kingsley family, who had systematically undervalued and acquired her artist's works through manipulative practices. "Darling, talent doesn't fade just because they try to bury it," Regina declared over lunch at her private club in the marina. "The question is, are you ready to reclaim your voice?" Under the guise of curating Kingsley Capital's corporate art collection, Lila began rebuilding her professional network. She utilized Evelyn's insistence on maintaining appearances to attend design conferences and art fairs, each event becoming an opportunity to connect with old colleagues and establish new alliances. The process required a delicate balance. By day, she maintained her role as the perfect corporate wife, attending board meetings and charity galas at Graham's side. But in carefully stolen moments, she was laying the groundwork for her independence, using the very skills Evelyn had taught her about networking and influence. "You've learned to move differently," Avery observed during one of their supervised lunches at Liren, "like a chess master who's finally seeing the whole board." Lila's transformation extended beyond the professional sphere. Through a discreet arrangement with Dr. Sarah Chen, a renowned psychiatrist who specialized in treating survivors of high society abuse, she began addressing the psychological trauma of her marriage. Their sessions, disguised as spa appointments at the Mandarin Oriental, helped Lila understand the intricate web of manipulation she'd been caught in. Dr. Chen, who had treated other women from San Francisco's elite circles, provided crucial insights into the patterns of control and abuse that characterized families like the Kingsleys. Your hypervigilance, your ability to read rooms and anticipate threats, these aren't weaknesses, Dr. Chen explained during one session. They're survival skills. Now it was time to turn them into strengths. Lila began applying these insights to her daily life. She transformed her forced social appearances into opportunities for gathering intelligence and building alliances. Every IT board she was pressured to join became a potential network of support. Every social obligation, a chance to strengthen her position. Noah, moving seamlessly through the world of luxury service, became an invaluable partner in her evolution. His wine expertise provided cover for their meetings, while his connections helped her establish secure channels of communication with other allies. "The best vintages," he reminded her during a wine tasting at the St. Regis, "develop their character under pressure. But timing the harvest is crucial." Through Noah's network, Lila met Sophia Anderson, a Swedish tech entrepreneur who had successfully sued her billionaire ex-husband despite his family's powerful connections. Sophia became a mentor, teaching Lila how to protect herself digitally and maintain secure communications. "The problem with golden handcuffs," Sophia noted during a secret meeting in her penthouse at 181 Fremont, "is that everyone sees the gold, but no one notices the handcuffs until it's too late." Under Sophia's guidance, Lila began taking coding classes, disguised as social media management workshops approved by Kingsley Capital's PR team. She learned to navigate cryptocurrency markets, creating a financial safety net that even Evelyn's extensive banking connections couldn't trace. Professional opportunities began emerging in unexpected places. A Middle Eastern royal family, impressed by her subtle recommendations during a state dinner, requested her services in redesigning their San Francisco pied-à-terre. Evelyn, seeing an opportunity to strengthen Kingsley Capital's international connections, unwittingly gave Lila permission to take on the project. The apartment became Lila's canvas for rebellion. Every design choice, while appearing to conform to the client's luxurious expectations, contained hidden elements of resistance and empowerment. The project's success led to more commissions, each carefully selected to expand her independent network while maintaining her cover as the dutiful Kingsley wife. "You've created something remarkable here," the princess told her during the reveal, understanding more than she let on. "A space that appears to conform, while subtly encouraging freedom. Rather like you, I suspect." Graham, focused on the Thompson merger and his own power plays, failed to notice how his wife's carefully curated social schedule was actually building her escape route. Each charity gala she hosted added to her list of allies. Every corporate event strengthened her position in San Francisco's power structure. Even Evelyn's attempts at control began to backfire. Evelyn's insistence that Lila join the board of the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art's Conservation Committee provided access to art world figures beyond the Kingsley family's influence. The mandatory appearances at Fashion Week events connected her with designers and creative directors who recognized her talent and offered quiet support. "You remind me of Coco Chanel," noted a legendary fashion editor during a private showing at Wilkes-Bashford. "Not the sanitized version in history books, but the real woman, the one who understood that style could be armor." Lila's inner circle grew, carefully, selectively. In addition to Avery and Noah, she found allies in unexpected places. A junior partner at Kingsley Capital's law firm who had witnessed Victoria's case being buried. A society photographer who had documented years of covered-up incidents. A retired doorman from their building who had maintained detailed records of suspicious activities. Marcus Kane, the hotel security chief, proved particularly valuable in teaching Lila counter-surveillance techniques. During apparently casual conversations at corporate events, he showed her how to spot tails, identify listening devices, and maintain operational security. "The biggest mistake they make," he told her while demonstrating how to sweep for bugs in her office, "is assuming that wealth equals competence. Their overconfidence creates blind spots." The greatest challenge was maintaining her composure as she uncovered more of the Kingsley family's secrets. Each new revelation about Victoria, about Graham's other victims, the systematic destruction of perceived threats, tested her resolve to stick to her carefully crafted plan. During a weekend charity retreat at the Kingsley family estate in Napa Valley, Lila had a moment of crisis. Walking through the manicured gardens where Victoria had once planted roses, she felt the weight of her predecessor's fate pressing down on her. "You're not alone this time," Avery reminded her during a secure call that evening, "and you're not the same person they tried to break." The support of other survivors proved crucial to Lila's resilience. Through carefully arranged meetings at art galleries and charity events, she connected with women who had escaped similar situations in San Francisco's elite circles. Each story of survival strengthened her resolve and refined her strategy. One such survivor, a former socialite who had rebuilt her life after escaping an abusive banking dynasty, taught Lila the importance of maintaining multiple identities within her role. "Let them think they've won," she advised during a seemingly casual lunch at Quince. "The perfect wife, the gracious hostess, the philanthropic face of the family. Play these roles so well, they never suspect you've outgrown them." Lila's evolution became a masterclass in strategic patience. She learned to use the Kingsley family's own weapons against them. Their obsession with appearances, their reliance on social networks, their assumption that wealth could buy silence and compliance. Even her sessions with Dr. Chen evolved, moving beyond therapy to strategy. The doctor, who had helped other women navigate similar escapes from powerful families, provided crucial insights into the psychology of her opponents. "Evelyn's control comes from her own fears," Dr. Chen observed. Understanding her vulnerabilities is as important as protecting yourself from her attacks. As autumn turned to winter, Lila's preparation began showing results. Her independent design work, though carefully masked as extensions of Kingsley Capital's influence, was gaining recognition in its own right. Her network of allies had grown into a sophisticated support system, each member carefully vetted and compartmentalized. Most importantly, she had learned to turn her trauma into strength. The hypervigilance that had once been a symptom of abuse became a finely tuned radar for detecting threats and opportunities. Her ability to read rooms and manipulate social situations, honed under Evelyn's cruel tutelage, became tools for building her escape route. During the annual Kingsley Capital Winter Gala at the Fairmont, Lila caught her reflection in a mirror and barely recognized herself. The woman who looked back wasn't just surviving anymore, she was preparing to thrive. Her Dior gown felt less like a costume and more like battle armor. Her diamonds, no longer chains, but weapons in her arsenal. "You've changed," Graham commented that evening, his tone carrying a note of suspicion. "There's something different about you lately." Lila gave him the smile she had perfected, empty and bright as the chandeliers above them. "Just growing into my role as a Kingsley woman, darling. Isn't that what you and Evelyn always wanted?" But beneath that practiced smile, Lila was ready for the next phase of her plan. The evidence was gathered. The allies were in position. Her strength had been tested and proven. The butterfly was ready to break free from its gilded cage, and the shockwaves would reshape San Francisco's social landscape forever. As she moved through the gala, accepting compliments and playing her part to perfection, Lila knew that everything was about to change. The skills she had gained, the strength she had found, and the network she had built were about to be tested in ways that would determine not just her future, but the future of everyone caught in the Kingsley family's web of influence. The following week brought unexpected opportunities for Lila to test her newfound strengths. A crisis at one of Kingsley Capital's luxury hotel properties required her to step in and manage a complete redesign of the presidential suite. The project, worth millions, would typically have been outsourced to a prestigious firm. But Lila convinced Graham and Evelyn that handling it internally would demonstrate the family's personal commitment to excellence. "Trust me to represent our family's standards," she told Evelyn over tea at the Battery. "After all, you've taught me everything about maintaining the Kingsley image," Lila told Evelyn. Pleased by what she perceived as Lila's submission to her influence, Evelyn agreed. It was exactly the opening Lila needed. The hotel project became a showcase for her strategic thinking. She assembled a team of contractors and artisans who, unknown to the Kingsleys, had all been victims of the family's business practices in the past. Each one brought not just their skills, but their own motivation for seeing Lila succeed in her larger plan. The marble for the bathroom. "We're sourcing it from the Castellano quarry in Italy," she informed Graham during a project review. What she didn't mention was that the Castellano family had once owned 3 luxury properties in San Francisco before Kingsley Capital orchestrated their financial ruin. Through the project, Lila also connected with Diane Zhang, a rising star in the Bay Area's real estate development scene. Diane, who had survived her own escape from an abusive business partnership, recognized the signs in Lila immediately. "The trick isn't just getting out," Diane advised during a private meeting in her office at Salesforce Tower. "It's making sure you have somewhere to land. Let's talk about your future in design. Your real future, not the one they've planned for you." Together, they began laying the groundwork for Lila's independent design firm, disguising their meetings as consultations for the hotel project. Diane introduced Lila to key players in the industry who operated outside the Kingsley sphere of influence, each connection carefully vetted and secured. The hotel project also allowed Lila to demonstrate her business acumen. She brought the redesign in under budget while exceeding expectations, earning praise from Kingsley Capital's board members. More importantly, she used the project to establish her own relationships with suppliers, contractors, and industry professionals, connections that would prove vital to her future independence. But one evening, as she reviewed project schedules and supplier contracts alone in her temporary office, a flicker of unease crept in. The tactical negotiations, the way she anticipated Evelyn's moves before they happened, how effortlessly she used charm to manipulate vendors. It all felt familiar. Uncomfortably so. For a fleeting moment, Lila caught her reflection in the glass wall and thought, "Is this what Evelyn sees in herself? Am I becoming her?" The thought chilled her more than she expected. Her rise in control and power had been hard-won, but now that she was tasting it, she wondered if the methods she used were too close to the ones she had once condemned. She sat with that feeling, the discomfort of it, until it passed, not because it disappeared, but because she chose to remember the difference. She wasn't doing this for domination or legacy. She was doing it for freedom, for justice, for something honest. "You've managed to turn a simple renovation into a masterclass in networking," Avery observed during a site visit. "They think you're building their empire, but you're actually building your escape route." Even Noah found ways to contribute to the project, using his wine expertise to help design a state-of-the-art wine cellar for the hotel's penthouse suite. Their professional interactions provided cover for sharing information and coordinating with their growing network of allies. As the hotel project neared completion, Lila faced a crucial test of her new capabilities. During the final week of construction, Evelyn's private investigator discovered one of Lila's secure communication channels with Avery. Instead of panicking, Lila used the skills she'd learned from Marcus Kane to turn the situation to her advantage. She orchestrated a subtle campaign of misinformation, letting Evelyn's spies discover carefully crafted evidence that led them to believe Avery was working against Lila's interests. The deception was so convincing that Evelyn actually warned Lila about Avery's supposed betrayal, unwittingly strengthening their cover for continued communication. Sometimes, Dr. Chen noted during their next session, the best defense is letting them think they're winning. You've learned to use their own paranoia as a shield. The success of the hotel project marked a turning point in Lila's journey. She had proved, to herself and her allies, that she could operate right under the Kingsley family's nose, building power and influence while appearing to submit to their control. More importantly, she had created a blueprint for her eventual emergence from their shadow. As winter settled over San Francisco, Lila's transformation was nearly complete. The frightened bride who had stood in the Fairmont's ballroom just months ago had evolved into a strategist capable of playing the long game. Her network of allies had grown into a sophisticated operation, each member carefully positioned to support her ultimate goal of freedom and justice. During the hotel's grand reopening gala, Lila stood beside Graham as he praised her work to the city's elite. She smiled and accepted the compliments with practiced grace. But her mind was already focused on the next phase of her plan. The evidence from Victoria's storage unit, combined with what she'd gathered through her growing network, was almost ready to be deployed. As she raised her champagne glass for a toast, Lila caught Evelyn watching her with an unreadable expression. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded room, and Lila wondered if her mother-in-law sensed the change in her. But then Graham's hand tightened possessively on her waist, and she remembered that her greatest protection was their certainty that they had broken her spirit. They would learn too late that they had instead forged her into something far more dangerous, a woman who had mastered their own game and was ready to rewrite the rules. The beginning of the end came during the annual Kingsley Foundation Winter Ball at the San Francisco Museum of Art. The grand hall glowed with thousands of imported lights, the modern glass and steel echoing the diamonds and ambitions of the city's elite. Lila stood at Graham's side in a custom Valentino gown, watching Evelyn work the room with practiced precision, knowing that in her Bottega Veneta clutch rested a USB drive that would shatter their carefully constructed world. The evidence from Victoria's storage unit had proved more explosive than anyone anticipated, not just proof of financial fraud and covered-up crimes, plus detailed documentation of the Kingsley family's systematic destruction of anyone who threatened their empire. Victoria, it seemed, had been more thorough than her killers realized. "Everything is in position," Noah murmured as he poured a rare vintage of Chateau Lafite Rothschild. "Sophia's team has confirmed the digital deadman switch is active. If anything happens to you, Everything goes public automatically. Lila maintained her perfect smile as she surveyed the room. The guest list read like a who's who of American power. Supreme Court justices, Silicon Valley titans, media moguls, and old money families whose fortunes were intricately tied to Kingsley Capital's secrets. Many of them would be collateral damage in what was about to unfold. The first move came from an unexpected direction. James Thompson, their supposed merger partner, approached Graham with news that made him visibly pale. "There seems to be some irregularity in the accounts," Thompson announced, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "My board is quite concerned about certain offshore transactions." Graham's grip on his whiskey glass tightened. "This isn't the place for business discussions, James." But Thompson, it turned out, had his own agenda. "Actually, Graham, I think this is exactly the place, especially given what the SEC will be announcing tomorrow morning." Evelyn materialized at Graham's side, her Chanel smile brittle. "Perhaps we should continue this conversation in private." As they moved toward the gallery's inner chamber, Lila caught Avery's eye across the room. Her friend was positioned near the museum's main security office, where Marcus Kane had arranged for certain surveillance footage to be conveniently archived. The confrontation that followed would be remembered in San Francisco's social circles for years to come. Thompson, it emerged, had been working with federal investigators for months. The Thompson merger wasn't just failing. It was a sophisticated sting operation. "Did you really think I wouldn't investigate after what happened to my sister?" Thompson's voice carried through the marble-clad chamber. "Victoria was my twin, Graham. Did you think I wouldn't seek justice?" The revelation hit the room like a thunderbolt. Lila watched the color drain from Evelyn's face as she realized the depth of their miscalculation. Victoria's brother had spent years working his way into position, gaining the Kingsley family's trust, all while building a case against them. But Thompson's revenge was just the beginning. As security personnel with federal badges began appearing at the gala's exits, Lila implemented the next phase of her plan. "I believe these belong in the public record," she announced, connecting her phone to the event's audiovisual system. The gallery's pristine walls came alive with projected documents, offshore account statements, surveillance photos, and confidential reports detailing decades of Kingsley family crimes. Graham moved toward her with dangerous intent, but Noah and Marcus Kane stepped forward, their positions carefully planned for this very moment. "Don't," Noah warned, the sommelier's charm replaced by cold determination. "The days of silencing people are over." Evelyn, ever the strategist, attempted to take control. "Lila, darling, clearly you're unwell. We can discuss this privately, find you the help you need. Like the help you found for Victoria in Switzerland?" Lila's voice carried through the stunned crowd. "Or perhaps like the sailing accident you arranged when she refused to cooperate?" The evidence continued to stream across the gallery walls. Photos of Victoria's final days, security footage from the Cayman Islands showing Graham's involvement, documentation of Evelyn's elaborate cover-up operation. But the true masterstroke came from an unexpected ally. Diane Zhang stepped forward, her tablet displaying live feeds from similar scenes playing out across San Francisco. Kingsley Capital's satellite offices were being raided, their secret server facilities secured, their private banking partners surrounded by federal agents. "Did you really think Lila was working alone?" Diane asked, her voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "We're all Victoria's legacy. Everyone you've tried to destroy over the years, working together, waiting for this moment." The fallout was immediate and catastrophic. Board members began receiving frantic calls from their lawyers. Social media exploded with leaked documents and accusations. The carefully constructed facade of Kingsley family respectability crumbled in real time. Graham's reaction was predictably violent. He lunged for Lila, but years of hypervigilance had prepared her. She sidestepped his attack, letting him crash into a display case of priceless artifacts. The shattering glass became a perfect metaphor for the destruction of his world. "Security cameras caught that, Graham," Lila informed him calmly. "Just like they caught what happened at our wedding. No more covering up your violence." Evelyn's composed mask finally cracked. "Are you ungrateful, little?" Evelyn began, but Lila cut her off. "Ungrateful? For teaching me how to navigate high society? For showing me how to manipulate people and maintain appearances? Lila's laugh was cold and clear. You taught me too well, Evelyn. Every lesson about power and control, every tutorial in destroying people's lives. I learned it all perfectly. The arrival of federal agents transformed the charity ball into a crime scene. Diamond bracelets were replaced with handcuffs. Miranda rights were read aloud to San Francisco's elite. Lila felt a surreal calm wash over her. The plan they had spent months executing had worked, perhaps too well. Families that had ruled over California's financial circles for generations were watching their empires fall. Children saw their parents taken away in handcuffs. Fortunes built on decades of corruption, coercion, and cruelty disintegrated in real time. You've destroyed everything, Graham snarled as federal agents escorted him toward the exit. Our family, our legacy, our entire world. No, Graham, Lila corrected him calmly. You destroyed it yourself. I'm just making sure the truth finally sees daylight. But the night's revelations weren't over. As agents combed through Evelyn's encrypted communications, they uncovered something that even shocked Lila. Evelyn had been planning to sacrifice Graham to save the empire, arranging for him to take the fall while she retained control through a shadow network of shell companies and proxy board members. My own son was becoming a liability, Evelyn explained with chilling composure as agents clasped handcuffs over her Cartier bangles. Sentiment is a luxury we cannot afford. Not in our position. The betrayal shattered something inside Graham. He erupted, shouting accusations, revealing secrets so dark and intricate they hadn't surfaced even in Lila's investigation. The full extent of the Kingsley family's corruption stunned even the seasoned federal agents. Throughout the chaos, Lila stood unwavering. The poise Evelyn had demanded of her now became her shield. She watched as the Kingsley empire collapsed, each revelation another brick tumbling from the dynasty that had tried to own her. Avery appeared at her side, squeezing her hand in silent solidarity. Victoria would be proud, she whispered. But the night's final twist came from an unexpected source. As Evelyn was led away in cuffs, she locked eyes with Lila one last time. Her voice, still wrapped in condescension, rang out. You think you've won? She asked. You think exposing our crimes will bring justice? Look around you, dear. Look at all these powerful people being dragged out. Their children, their families, their employees, thousands of lives ruined. Was your revenge really worth destroying so many innocent people? The question struck Lila harder than any of Graham's violent outbursts. She looked around the modern art gallery at the stunned faces of people whose carefully crafted lives had just collapsed. Children of privilege, now confronted with uncertain futures. Employees questioning whether their jobs would still exist tomorrow. Charities, once funded by Kingsley family donations, left on the brink. That's the price of justice, Noah said softly, appearing at her side. The truth hurts more people than the lies sometimes. As dawn broke over San Francisco, the full scale of the night's revelations began to surface. Kingsley Capital's stock was in freefall, prompting trading halts across major exchanges. The Thompson merger was revealed as part of an intricate federal sting involving multiple agencies. Arrests were being made throughout the city as irrefutable evidence of systemic corruption emerged. Lila stood on the steps of the gallery, watching the rising sun cast a golden hue across the skyline. The files Victoria had once gathered, now distributed to the right hands, had been replaced in Lila's clutch by a deeper burden. The responsibility for what came next. Was Evelyn right? She asked Avery, who stood beside her as another group of federal agents moved into the building. Did we cause more harm than good? You gave people the truth, Avery replied gently. What they choose to do with it is up to them. The media was already swarming, eager to dissect the scandal that would dominate headlines for months. Lila understood this wasn't the end. There would be hearings, testimonies, and the arduous process of ensuring that those unjustly affected would find paths to recover. The Kingsley family's reign had ended, but the damage extended far beyond their circle. The innocent children of culpable parents, employees kept in the dark, cultural and philanthropic institutions now left scrambling. All of them bore part of the cost for uncovering the truth. Miss Holloway, reporters called as she descended the museum steps. Did you orchestrate this from the beginning? Was your marriage to Graham Kingsley part of a larger plan? Lila paused and turned slightly, gazing back at the building where her illusion of a perfect life had shattered. In its place stood something harsher, colder, but undeniably more real. "No," she said at last, "I planned to be the perfect Kingsley wife. Instead, I became something they never expected. Someone who refused to be broken." As dawn lit a transformed San Francisco skyline, Lila realized her greatest challenge was only just beginning. Exposing the truth had been the easy part. Living with its consequences would demand everything she had left. That morning brought a cascade of new revelations. As federal agents combed through Kingsley Capital's sleek headquarters on Montgomery Street, they discovered a concealed vault inside Evelyn's private office. What lay inside? Decades' worth of blackmail material, damning evidence of crimes and scandals, revealed how the Kingsley family had maintained their grip over the city's elite for generations. "The scale of this is without precedent," the lead federal prosecutor declared during an emergency meeting in a secured conference suite at the Four Seasons. "We're looking at potentially hundreds of indictments involving some of the most influential figures in the country." Lila sat at the long glass table, still wearing her couture gown from the previous night, her presence incongruous among the dark suits and flashing credentials. As the magnitude of what they had uncovered became clearer, so too did the cost. The evidence didn't just implicate the Kingsley dynasty, it unveiled a far-reaching web of corruption that infected every layer of society. The Brazilian lithium deal, one FBI analyst said, highlighting files on a secure monitor, was more than just shady business. It masked an extensive international money laundering scheme tied to numerous global conglomerates. Even more shocking was the realization that the environmental disaster used to hide the fraud had been engineered deliberately. The loss of life, the ecological damage, it had all been part of the plan. As the morning wore on, more horrifying truths came to light. The so-called accidents that had befallen critics of the family weren't isolated incidents. There had been journalists, regulators, and even estranged relatives, all silenced before they could pose a threat. Noah, who remained at Lila's side throughout, received word from his European contacts. "The Swiss accounts have been frozen," he reported. "Evelyn's escape routes are evaporating. The offshore network is imploding." But it wasn't just numbers and legal documents that crushed Lila. It was the people. Stories began to surface, real, human stories. Former employees who'd been bullied into silence, family businesses that had been bankrupted. Ordinary lives destroyed by the greed and manipulation of the Kingsleys. During a brief break, Lila stood in the marble powder room of the hotel, facing her reflection in the gilt-edged mirror. She still wore the uniform of the world she had just dismantled, but now stood on the other side of its power. "You did what needed to be done," Avery said quietly, stepping in beside her. "But that doesn't make it easier." Outside, the line of reporters, agents, and attorneys stretched down the corridor. The day was far from over. Each outlet wanted Lila's perspective on a different angle of the scandal. She kept her poise, channeling the media skills Evelyn had once drilled into her, but now wielding them to amplify the truth. A particularly poignant moment came when Margaret Blackwood, the woman who had once dared defy the Kingsley family, arrived at the Four Seasons. Despite her years, she moved with the quiet strength of someone who had outlasted monsters. "They take everything from you," Margaret said, her lined hands gently clasping Lila's. "But they can't take who you are, unless you let them." By evening, the collapse of Kingsley Capital's empire was visible to the world. The stock market had plunged to its worst day since the 2008 crash. Companies tied to Kingsley Capital faced imminent insolvency. The shockwaves were rippling through global finance, shaking foundations long thought unbreakable. Graham, now in federal custody, began cooperating with investigators, offering increasingly damning revelations in a desperate attempt to save himself. His disclosures about Evelyn's plans left even seasoned agents stunned. "She was going to have me institutionalized," he raged during interrogation. Her own son. She had the commitment paperwork prepared months ago. "Lila wasn't the threat, I was." Evelyn, ever composed, preserved her aura of control even in detainment. Presented with overwhelming evidence, she merely offered a cold smile and requested counsel from the elite firm of Wexler, Temple & Lipton. Her final message to Lila, delivered through her attorney, was both cryptic and chilling. "You'll understand one day. Here, power isn't about justice, it's about survival. And survival always comes at a cost." As night blanketed San Francisco, Leela stood by the window of her suite at the Four Seasons, watching the lights flicker across a skyline that once represented the Kingsleys' invincibility. Now it felt like the city itself had awakened, blinking in the light of long-buried truths. Noah joined her at the window, no longer just a sommelier, but a strategist, a survivor, and a partner in her revolution. "The French call this l'heure bleue," he said softly. "The blue hour. That moment between day and night, when everything changes." The days ahead would bring more headlines, more indictments, and the continued unspooling of a dynasty's legacy. But for now, standing in the silence of that in-between hour, Lila allowed herself to feel it. The weight of what they had done and the world they had begun to reshape. Avery stood beside Lila at the window. When the adrenaline fades, that's when the real work starts. Lila nodded, fully aware that exposing the Kingsley family's empire was only step one. The greater challenge would be helping rebuild what had been lost, restoring faith in a city broken by deception. As midnight approached, Lila received a final update. James Thompson, Victoria's brother, had officially taken control of Kingsley Capital's board. His first move? Establishing a reparations trust for the victims of the family's crimes, with Lila as one of its founding trustees. "It's not just about exposing them anymore," James said on a secure call. "It's about healing, and making damn sure this never happens again." Standing at the suite's window, watching San Francisco's skyline shimmer in the night, Lila understood that her mission had only just begun. Bringing down the Kingsleys was only the beginning. "We'll have to be stronger than they ever were," she murmured, her voice carrying the weight of conviction. "Not to maintain power, but to ensure it never gets misused like this again." The night stretched ahead, filled with unknowns. But for the first time since she had walked down the aisle at the St. Regis, Lila felt entirely free. The cost of that freedom had been steep, more than she could have imagined. But with her allies beside her, watching a city wake from its slumber, she knew every sacrifice had mattered. 3 months later, San Francisco's elite landscape looked nothing like it had before. The ballrooms that once echoed with Kingsley galas now hosted conversations about asset seizures, plea deals, and public reckonings. The winter social calendar, once packed with galas and charity auctions, had been replaced with hearings and televised depositions. Lila viewed this new world from an unexpected vantage point. The glass-walled office of the Kingsley Victims' Compensation Fund, located in what had once been her prison, the penthouse of the Kingsley Tower on Park Avenue. The very place that had once suffocated her now served as a refuge and resource center for survivors of elite abuse. "The irony's not lost on me," she said to Avery during a late-night strategy session, undoing the damage with the very tools they used to cause it. The work was intense. Every day, new survivors came forward, and with them came deeper truths. What had once been thought of as a singular scandal was now revealed to be systemic, a pattern of manipulation and silence that extended through generations, across industries, and down the social ladder. From CEOs to doormen, no layer of society had gone untouched by the Kingsleys' reach. Graham's trial had become a national spectacle. His public breakdown revealed secrets that stunned even those familiar with the Kingsley legacy. He turned completely against Evelyn. His testimony laid bare decades of manipulation and psychological abuse within the Kingsley dynasty. "She made me what I am," he declared in a particularly dramatic courtroom moment. Every act of cruelty, every staged accident, every ruined life, it was all part of her design. Even the death of Victoria, he claimed, had been orchestrated by Evelyn to test his loyalty. Evelyn, for her part, maintained her poised exterior, even as her empire collapsed around her. From her confinement in a private estate-turned-detention facility in the Hudson Valley, she continued to manipulate, tapping into her still extensive web of influence. "Never underestimate a wounded snake," Noah cautioned one evening over dinner at his new wine bar in Brooklyn Heights. "Evelyn still has allies in places we haven't uncovered yet." His warning proved prescient. As Lila worked tirelessly to repair what the Kingsleys had destroyed, she encountered unexpected sabotage. Board members who had pledged their support suddenly created bottlenecks. Donations meant to support victim funds were delayed without reason. Crucial documents vanished from encrypted systems. Her contingency plans had contingency plans, Marcus Kane explained grimly. Now head of security for the Victims' Compensation Fund, Marcus had uncovered new encrypted accounts and hidden caches of data nearly every week. Months later, the most unsettling discovery came from James Thompson, Victoria's brother. During a private briefing at Thompson Global's new offices, he showed Lila files that reframed everything. Victoria wasn't just building a case against the Kingsleys, he said, navigating through a network of encrypted archives. She was mapping an entire ecosystem of families like them, dynasties built on generations of silence and control. The Kingsleys were just one head of a vast, toxic hydra. This revelation forced Lila to reconsider the scope of what they'd accomplished. The Kingsleys' fall had left a vacuum. Now other corrupt bloodlines were moving to fill it, reshaping, regrouping, and rebuilding. As the team gathered in what had once been Kingsley Capital's boardroom, the symbolism wasn't lost on anyone. "Feels like tempting fate," Avery remarked, scanning the skyline through the panoramic windows. The same view once represented dominance. Now it signaled duty. Lila had brought together a formidable alliance. Diane Zhang, with her digital forensics and tech acumen, Sophia Anderson, leveraging financial intelligence from her battles with another dynasty, and Margaret Blackwood, whose institutional memory of elite corruption was invaluable. The old guard families proved invaluable in helping Lila understand the deeper currents of systemic corruption, but it was Dr. Sarah Chen who diagnosed the most vital truth. "We're not just confronting financial crime," she told them during a closed-door strategy session. "We're up against a mindset, a worldview passed down through bloodlines, a belief that power justifies everything." That chilling assessment became more evident as they sifted through the deeper layers of Victoria's investigation. The documents detailed a web of intermarried elites and shared interests, each family guarding the other's secrets behind a shield of philanthropy and public virtue. The Kingsleys had wielded immense influence, but they were only one cog in a larger, self-sustaining machine of privilege and control. "It's like a matryoshka of rot," Noah remarked, his former wine world expertise now bolstered by insight into how luxury industries enabled this elite protection racket. Each layer hides a more elaborate one underneath. Through it all, Lila's transformation only deepened. The same social strategies Evelyn had once drilled into her, the ability to manage power dynamics, intuit hidden motives, and remain poised under fire, became the very weapons she used to dismantle the system. A pivotal moment arrived when the fund hosted its first major public initiative, a symposium at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Lila personally curated the event, inviting survivors, reformers from elite backgrounds, and global advocates. The goal was twofold: expose generational patterns of abuse and offer models for real accountability and systemic healing. Even incarcerated, Evelyn attempted to derail it. Allies still loyal to her whispered to tabloids, painting Lila as vindictive, unstable, and opportunistic. Articles seeded doubt about her qualifications and hinted she was exploiting trauma for personal power. The night before the symposium, a package arrived at Lila's Tribeca apartment. Inside, a single black rose and a handwritten note unmistakably from Evelyn. "Every revolution becomes the monster it claims to slay. You'll learn." But Lila had spent too long letting fear define her narrative. At the symposium's opening address, she projected the note onto the screen surrounding the Temple of Dender. "This," she said calmly, "is how power preserves itself, not through laws, but through intimidation and shame." She addressed the crowded audience at the symposium with steady resolve. "They rule through fear, through veiled threats, and constant reminders that power must never be challenged," Lila said, her voice echoing through the hall. "But we're making a different choice. We are choosing to use our access and status to change things, not to uphold abuse." The event became a turning point. Survivors from other dynasties stepped forward. Whistleblowers from unrelated legacy families submitted new evidence. What Lila had started had grown beyond even her careful plans, into something organic and urgent. But the surge in progress brought a wave of retaliation. Families implicated in Victoria's research began moving swiftly. There were coordinated cyber attacks against the fund. Lila's security team thwarted multiple threats, some disturbingly close to home. "They're terrified," Harper commented during a midnight intelligence briefing, "not just of being exposed, but of what your leadership proves, that their control isn't untouchable." Then came a revelation that shook Lila to her core. Among Evelyn's confiscated files, investigators uncovered archival records implicating Lila's own lineage. Decades earlier, the Moros, her paternal family, had been part of the same circle of influence she now fought to dismantle. "Your grandmother didn't simply step away from society," James Thompson revealed, handing Lila a document from Victoria's cache. "She renounced it, walked away from the entire system to protect your father from becoming what people like Dominic became. She gave up everything for that." The truth landed with enormous weight. Lila's journey, from sheltered heiress to survivor to revolutionary, had roots planted long before her birth. Her resolve, her empathy, even her endurance, they weren't born from her suffering. They were inherited. As the first anniversary of the Kingsley collapse neared, Lila returned to the Chelsea venue where her carefully staged wedding had spiraled into chaos. This time, the same chandelier-lit room hosted a benefit for survivors of private high-status abuse. "We've come full circle," Noah remarked as he poured a 1990 Bordeaux. "But this time, we get to choose the ending." The fund's mission had grown far beyond its original mandate. It was now the epicenter of a movement for accountability among the global elite. Other powerful families, faced with growing public scrutiny, began coming forward voluntarily, disclosing long-buried wrongs and making amends. Lila's network had evolved as well. Harper launched a foundation offering legal aid to abuse victims from prominent families. Noah's Wine Bar in Brooklyn had become an informal sanctuary where stories flowed more freely than any vintage. Diane Lynn had been developing encrypted communication systems specifically designed to protect insiders from influential dynasties. But Evelyn's cryptic warning about revolutions continued to echo in Lila's mind. With every step forward came new resistance. Every milestone unveiled deeper layers of institutional rot. "The real challenge isn't toppling the structure," Dr. Chen told her during their last therapy session. "It's staying human while dismantling systems that were built to strip people of that very thing. Remember what brought you here." As Lila stood by the ballroom window of the Chelsea Grand Hotel, watching snow gather along Madison Avenue, she felt the weight of what had been lost and what had been gained. The girl who once accepted silence as the cost of privilege no longer existed. In her place was a woman who understood that real strength lay in disrupting patterns of harm, not preserving them. The downfall of the Kingsley Empire had only marked the start. The fight to reshape society into something had only just begun. But as she watched young survivors take the stage, recounting their stories beneath the same chandelier that had once framed her own captivity, Lila understood that every wound had paved the way for something new. True freedom, she realized, wasn't just about unlocking one's own cage. It was about ensuring those cages never got built again. 5 years later, Lila stood in the corner office of the Morrison Center for Social Justice, overlooking the glittering Manhattan skyline. The space once belonged to the Kingsleys, a symbol of inherited dominance. Now it was a headquarters for change, a watchtower for a city learning to hold the powerful accountable. "The impact report just came in," Harper said, stepping in with her tablet in hand. Her legal team, now spanning multiple continents, occupied nearly an entire floor of the building. "We've helped over 3,000 survivors escape cycles of manipulation and violence from powerful households," she continued, her voice full of cautious pride. Julian's Wine Lounge in Brooklyn had evolved into a network of discreet havens, each disguised as a high-end hospitality venue, offering sanctuary to those escaping situations like Lila's. His deep knowledge of luxury service had been instrumental in creating spaces where survivors from privileged backgrounds could begin again without sacrificing the sense of comfort they'd been raised in. "Victoria would be proud," said James Rowe during a monthly board session. His sister's mission had grown far beyond revealing the sins of one dynasty. The documents she had preserved had ignited a global reckoning, shedding light on patterns of abuse and exploitation across the world's elite. The Morrison Initiative had become a benchmark for reimagining corrupted legacies into platforms for justice and reform. Families long entrenched in silence were beginning to confront their pasts, voluntarily, cautiously, but undeniably. The most profound transformation, however, had occurred within Lila herself. The tools Evelyn once used to control her, image, etiquette, social power, had become Lila's weapons of resistance. She had not only preserved her empathy, but had sharpened it into a strategy for systemic change. In a rare pause between meetings, she visited the restored penthouse that had once been her cage. Now a therapeutic sanctuary for trauma survivors, the suite's opulence had been reimagined as comfort rather than command. In the master bedroom, where once she'd endured nights of dread, a healing circle was in session, soft voices replacing silence with solidarity. "Sometimes I see old press clippings," Lila confided to Harper that evening as they sipped a vintage drip Julian had set aside for the initiative's 5-year milestone. That woman, smiling in couture, standing beside a man who would ruin lives, she's a ghost now. The story's final turn came wrapped in a memory. A sealed envelope, left by Lila's grandmother and timed to be opened 5 years after the Kingsley collapse, held a list. Names, addresses, correspondence. Families who, like the Morrisons, had walked away from corrupt power generations ago. A hidden coalition that had waited, quietly safeguarding others in a society that punished dissent. Now, inspired by the initiative's success, they had come forward. And with them, a new chapter began. "Your grandmother wrote that true power isn't in what you can take from others," Lila read from the letter, her voice trembling with emotion, "but in what you can help them reclaim for themselves." As she prepared for yet another evening at the plaza, this time not for a gala hosted by others, but for a celebration of survivors who had rebuilt their lives, she caught her reflection in the office window. The woman staring back at her wore no trace of the diamonds that once signified ownership by the Kingsley name. Instead, around her neck hung a modest pendant, Victoria's, discovered among the files in that long-forgotten downtown storage unit. The city stretched endlessly beneath her, its lights flickering against the encroaching dusk. Somewhere out there, other stories like hers were unfolding. People were finding their courage, finding their voices, turning wounds into purpose. "Ready?" Harper asked from the office doorway. Lila smiled, collecting her things. The work wasn't done, might never be, but what they had built together was something Evelyn could never have imagined, a means to use the very tools of power and privilege to dismantle the systems they once protected. "You know what Evelyn said during her last appeal?" Lila asked as they rode the elevator down. "She said I had become exactly what she trained me to be, someone who knew how to wield power. She meant it as an insult," she added. "But she was right. I just chose to wield it differently." Stepping into the cool Manhattan night, Lila Morrison, no longer Kingsley property, but something infinitely more powerful, felt the quiet strength of all that had changed, and of all the work that still lay ahead. The cost of freedom had been steep, but its worth, immeasurable. She had broken free of her golden cage, and in doing so, had given others the courage to find their wings. The air was filled with the scent of spring, of renewal, of transformation still underway. With her head high and purpose in her step, Lila walked into the night, knowing each step helped light the path for others. "Hey there, our wonderful friends. You're still here, aren't you? And if you've stayed with us this far, maybe something in this story has touched your heart in a way that words can barely explain. So let's pause, just for a moment, and look at all of this from a place beyond right or wrong." The story of Charlotte Morrison wasn't just about uncovering corruption or breaking free from a powerful family. It was about the quiet, deeply personal journey of reclaiming one's own voice in a world that often rewards silence. Her path, filled with fear, strength, loss, and resilience, reminds us of something Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once wrote: "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Each of us carries invisible battles. Sometimes we stay silent because speaking out means risking everything. But what if, like Charlotte, your truth could help someone else escape their cage too? This journey shows us that healing doesn't come from revenge, but from clarity, courage, and a willingness to be transformed by pain. As Epictetus taught, it's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. Charlotte didn't let her past define her. She used it to shape a future where others could find safety, truth, and their own wings. So if something in this story has stirred something within you, let that feeling breathe. Reflect, reach out. Maybe this is your moment to begin again too. If this message resonates with you, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Let's grow this community of strength, truth, and transformation together. Because healing isn't a destination, it's a journey. And no one should walk it alone.